Welcome to UK Explored, where we visit areas so that you don't have to. And for this video, I took a deep dive into the most dangerous areas and estates in Cardiff. Now, Cardiff is a great city overall. I like it. It has a large student population, some awesome modern amenities, but it also has some absolute hellhole estates and it has some crazy high crime rates, as I'm going to show you. So let's kick this off with the fifth most dangerous area on the list, and that's Caerau. So Caerau is located to the far west of the city centre, and it runs alongside the most deprived area in Cardiff, which is Ely. So you know that you're on the wrong side of the city if you're here. Caerau may be fifth in terms of crime rate, but not only is 170 a crazy high crime rate when you compare it to the national average of just 80. Walking around the area, the litter, the fly tipping, the boarded up houses, and the general state of the area speaks volumes. Looking at the demographic data for the area, you can see that it's predominantly a white area and there's around 12,000 population. I'll start off here with the local pub, the Highfields Inn. It looks nice enough from the outside, right? But Googling it, just the top two results showed that there are stories of people swinging machetes around inside and large drug busts happen in the car park. It sounds like a fun place to have a pint, I'm sure. Maybe I'll pop in next time. Walking around, as you can see, there are loads of flats and affordable housing complexes, the usual stuff that's a breeding ground for antisocial behaviour across the UK. This parkland and fort here is the best that Caerau has to offer in terms of natural beauty and an escape from those housing estates. It was a decent enough park, I shouldn't complain, even if someone has blown up the bin. There are a couple of shopping areas, of course, and I was reading online that this is where a lot of the scuffles go down after dark. It has the usual mix of overpriced newsagents, bookies and chippies. Along with some other random shops, and this row here in particular does look pretty depressing, doesn't it? The chippy wasn't open when I was there, so I can't comment on the quality of the food. But it looks like the curry sauce was the last thing that this guy tried. On that note, one of the stranger things I noticed around Caerau was the number of dead birds on the street. I didn't film them because it's gross and you don't need to see that, but there were so many that it's obvious that one or more residents are involved. Or maybe the air quality is just so toxic that they're falling out of the sky. I don't know. As you can see, the number of bulky items dumped and fly tipped around the area is pretty crazy, as is the general litter and untidiness of the area. I mean, that's a surfboard right there, right? There are loads of windows boarded up or put in as well, and I heard some crazy shouting and screaming coming from inside some of the houses and also in the distance when I was filming. Digging deeper into the crime stats for Caerau, violent crimes and antisocial behaviour make up for more than half the crimes reported, which isn't that unusual. Some of the more notable recent crimes include a murder that made national headlines a couple of months ago. Assaults, both domestic and random, are very common, as are drugs busts, and organised crime gangs operate in the area. So yeah, it is a dangerous area. I'm not sure if it's a good thing or not, but housing is a steal in Caerau. According to Rightmove, the average house price over the last year was around 100,000. Flats are going for as low as 40 grand, and semi-detached houses going for 110. Even at that price, I'm not sure I'd buy an investment property here though, with the number of houses that had their windows put in and the stories of all the illegal activities and cannabis grows. So that just about wraps up Caerau. The stats don't lie, it is a dangerous area. Yet it's the least dangerous area on this list, so stay tuned because things are going to get pretty crazy. The next area on the list is Riverside and Pontcanna, which are located just north of the city centre and covers a lot of the green areas and sports stuff in Cardiff. The stats for Riverside and Pontcanna always seem to be grouped, but after exploring both areas, it's definitely Riverside that hosts most of the problems. Demographically, Riverside is the most diverse area on this list, and walking around you can see from the shops and amenities that this is very evident. The areas have a combined crime rate of 187, and it's a no-brainer that Riverside on its own is going to be a lot higher. It's the usual theme, and this was very consistent across Cardiff. There are blocks of social housing and flats with just litter everywhere. People seem to freely dump stuff on the streets. The whole area is in need of a good clean-up, and a lot of the buildings look like they're in need of repairs. The shopping areas look like a step back in time. It's endless takeaways, discount stores, vape shops and barber shops. I passed loads of dodgy characters hanging out in the streets, drinking and smoking weed. There are loads of these back alleys, which are obviously problems as the council have put up signs asking people not to flight it, which never seems to make any difference. You wouldn't want to go through these late at night, and I wouldn't be surprised if the gates have been put up on either side so that it could be locked at certain times. And you know it's bad when there is an ever-growing pile of dump mattresses, not just one. I saw a couple of divans dumped whilst walking around as well, as you'll see in a bit. So all we need now is a headboard and we've got the whole set. Riverside was probably the worst area for fly tipping and bulky items being dumped on the streets and down back alleys on this list. And it's crazy to think that the area is just a stone's throw away from Cardiff's Principality Stadium, which is the home of Welsh Rugby Union and hosts other major events. With such a high crime rate, again, it's no surprise that there are endless wild headlines coming out of the area. It's really the seriousness of a lot of crimes that's quite alarming. There is clearly organised crime gangs operating in this area as well. And some of the people on Wales' most wanted list are known to live in the area. I don't know what's up with this Rightmove data, but apparently the average house price over the last year across Riverside was in the 326,000 range. I'm sure there are some nice areas here that might reflect that. And of course you're close to the stadium, the castle and some other cool stuff in Cardiff. But you just saw what I saw when I was there. And all of the bad stuff is also going to be just as close if you live here. Okay, so the third most dangerous area in Cardiff is called Adamsdown, and this is located just east of the city centre. Now, if you thought Cardiff had a litter problem from what you've seen so far, the state of Adamsdown is next level. There are times where I literally couldn't avoid stepping in someone's leftovers. There's rubbish sprawling out from all the bins, general waste everywhere. I literally slipped on a banana peel at one point, and I mean, you can see for yourself here, it's ridiculous. At first I thought, maybe it's bin day and a bin or two has been knocked over, but I think every day is bin day in Adamsdown, and a lot of the residents just throw their rubbish in the street because they're in terraced houses and they're happy to let nature take its course. As you'll see from the video, there were loads of birds pecking around in the scraps and making it worse, and you have to assume that there's a serious rodent and vermin problem as well as a result of all this junk everywhere. It's just a mess, it really is. It was quite surprising to me. What isn't a surprise, really, is that the area stank really bad. Maybe the sewage system is blocked out from all the rubbish, or it may have just been the rubbish itself that smelled, but yeah, it wasn't great to be there, and I can't imagine what it's like to live in it. But either way, this has to be one of the worst areas to live in Cardiff. And with a crime rate of 255, there is also a good chance that you're going to be a victim of something sooner or later as well. It's a mostly white area, but there is a fairly diverse population. And again, this is represented in the main shopping areas. It's also an income-deprived area, which isn't a huge surprise as high-crime areas typically struggle with poverty as well. Adamsdown is in the bottom 10% in terms of income across Wales. So poor health, failing education, and all those other social issues follow suit as well. Going back to the crime rate of 255, that is pretty bonkers. The police have been given extra powers and taken some special measures again, but it's not going to turn things around. It looks like they dish out dispersal orders and hand out ASBOs and ankle tags like crazy, but the crime rate is still going up, not down. Of course, there are endless wild headlines covering everything from murder to massive drug busts in the area. Another surprising thing is that house prices aren't cheap in Adamsdown. According to Rightmove, the average price over the last year was in the 225k range. I found this a bit odd, so I did look into it a bit closer. There are actually loads of 4 to 5 bedroom terraced townhouses up for sale, pushing the prices up. These are almost certainly used as houses of multiple occupancy for the most part, right? Which goes a long way to explaining the state of the area and the crime rate, to be honest. So the next area on the list is called Butetown, and this area is located just south of the city centre, crossing over the railway track. The crime rate in Butetown is a whopping 277, and as soon as I got here, I could tell things had stepped up a notch. There are these high-rise tower blocks, there are clusters of flats and social housing. There's junk everywhere, of course, and just a different feeling from the other areas I'd already covered. To be fair, there's really two parts to Butetown, right? In the north, near the centre of Cardiff, it's run down. There are shops and houses that are boarded up. You see some large historic buildings like this one, but they're not in too good of a shape. And it's densely populated in the north, and this is where most of the antisocial problems are. Then there's the south, which covers Cardiff Bay. This is a much more commercial and touristy area, of course. It's home to the famous Millennium Centre, and there's been lots of development here over the years and money thrown at it, and it's quite a nice place to visit. Here's the demographic data, and for further social proof about how dangerous Butetown is the area I saw pop up most when Googling, what areas in Cardiff locals think are dangerous or no-go areas or places that you don't want to live. Butetown and the Bay Area is also known to be one of the red light districts in Cardiff, or the main red light district area I should say. And of course that brings its own host of problems. And it's home to one of the most famous criminal cases in Welsh history as well, to be honest. Back in the 90s, a prostitute was murdered in the Bay Area. 3 men were sentenced to life, only to be released a couple of years later when it became obvious that they were innocent. And years after that, the real killer was identified through DNA. It's a wild story. It's no surprise that Butetown is another area where the Welsh police have been given extra powers to try and deal with the antisocial behaviours. I'm not sure how well it's working, as the crime rate is through the roof obviously. There is loads of organised crime in the area, murders. Look at that, even crystal meth is here. It sounds pretty crazy over in Butetown at times, to be honest. These converted shipping containers here have been built to provide emergency short stay accommodation, due to Cardiff having some 8,000 plus homeless on the waiting list to be homed, would you believe? That's a pretty telling insight into how bad things really are getting into this country right now, especially in regard to affordable housing. On that note, the average house prices are in the 218,000 range, and I'm not surprised by this, to be honest. I can see why certain parts of Butetown would be quite desirable, but it's not a large area, so you do have to keep in mind that you're never far away from some of these areas I've shown you here if you do move to the greater area of Butetown. So the area of Cardiff with the highest crime rate by far is Cathays. Now Cathays is an area just north of the city centre, and it's sandwiched in between some of the problem areas we've already covered. We've got Riverside to the left, Adamsdown to the right, and Butetown is just below. And it's a melting pot for antisocial behaviour and crime, as it's also the student district with the university. Now not only is Cathays South the highest crime rated neighbourhood in Wales, with an astronomical crime rate of 351, it's also the 24th highest crime rate neighbourhood in the whole of England and Wales. Now that's quite an achievement, but not one that you'd be proud of. Most of the crime revolves around shoplifting, drunken behaviour, assaults, and apparently it's the bike theft capital of the country. But there's also an underbelly of serious crimes that happen here. There have been a number of heinous murders and serious assaults that have made national headlines in recent years. And to further prove that this isn't just conjecture on my part or sensationalism, I browsed some forums where residents share their experiences living in Cathays, and there was rarely a good word spoken. Some of the highlights included students making life a misery for people there and music blaring for 18 hours a day. A number of people said that rats are a huge problem, which I can totally believe seeing the amount of litter and junk everywhere. This person here describes the area as being like a war zone, and if it couldn't get any worse than that, this resident described it as hell. The police do try and work with students in the area, both asking them to behave and warning them to stay vigilant. And obviously it's a shame because many students come to Cardiff from all over the world, and a lot of them see their dreams turn into nightmares pretty quickly. If you're trying to find a positive here, like visually, it's not the worst area on this list, but again, that's nothing to be proud of. Sure, there's litter and junk everywhere, a little graffiti, even over the front of some houses. There are boarded up houses and shops. There are dodgy alleyways that look super dangerous and seedy. I saw evidence of drug paraphernalia and day drinking on the floor. But after a day in Cardiff's most dangerous hoods, it didn't feel that bad walking around here during the day. Maybe I've become desensitized, and of course, it's nighttime where things are going to get really crazy. House prices average around 274,000, but obviously you'd be crazy to buy a home to live here and raise a family. Most of these properties are student lets or houses of multiple occupancy. Cardiff has a student population of around 33,000, and I'm not sure how many live in and around Cathays, but it's going to be a lot. And no one who isn't a student wants to be around students, right? Let's be honest. Anyway, that wraps up the 5 most dangerous areas based on the official police statistics and some other data. If you have lived in any of these areas, or you just have any thoughts or comments on this video, please drop a comment below. I'd love to hear it. Have a good one.